I have been in this club a long time, and I've always loved Ian's speeches. I have never once come away saying I didn't learn anything from that speech. It always makes me think about something, and I often, when we have coffee afterwards, I ask for more clarification. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about his speeches and this club. I always learn something new. So this morning, please help me welcome Ian Black with his speech from Lead to Laser. Please welcome Ian Black. Let's go.
Words are singularly one of the most persuasive forces available to humanity. We use them all the time. Winston Churchill used words extremely effectively during the Second World War to rally the Britons against the Nazis. The written word is the way we actually can pass on information. The printed word is the way we can actually multiply it so many, many people can see it. In the distant past, the church used to control the words. They had monks who would spend years and years writing out words in books. They were really only the preview of the powerful, the people who were in power, and they dictated them out to everybody to follow. But it wasn't until 1450 when that changed. When Gutenberg, he didn't invent the printing press, but what he did invent was he invented a way to use movable type and reuse it and be able to manufacture it in a way that he could make enough of it to print books. And as you all know, the Reformation, the new Protestantism, wouldn't have happened without the ability to print documents and print treatises that they could bang up on church doors. And he invented actually the mechanism to make those little pieces of lead letters. Tin, lead, and this weird substance called antimony, which I never ever heard of before when I was doing the research on this. And you know that technology stayed in effect for over 550 years. And in fact, when I started working in the advertising business in 1961, the highest quality typography you could buy was set by typesetters who were setting it one character at a time. He's picking them out of the tray here, and he's adding them to this line. He's literally doing it letter by letter. That was 1961. So what has changed? Well, a lot has changed. And of course, what most people don't realize is that typesetting unions, the people who actually were these guys, the typesetters, they were extremely powerful. they could close a newspaper by going on strike. And there was no way around it, because these guys had the power of typography. We don't recognize that today because, of course, it's changed. But you know, the typographic unions were the oldest trade union in the United States. Hundreds of thousands of members. And, but you know, technological advances started to happen in their trade, other ways of doing things, and their numbers came down. And as you probably are aware, as we are in the world today, the print industry is shrinking. There are no longer the financial basis to support newspapers. So a lot of people don't realize that, in fact, newspapers made their money, a lot of their money, from the classifieds. The classifieds? You remember the back of the paper when it was filled with all those ads? All set. Now, of course, the newspapers that we grew up with, they weren't set singularly. They had machines, they had developed machines that could actually, they were actually machines that had boiling lead sitting in a cauldron, and the guy was pressing on a typewriter thing, pressing it. And every time he'd press on it, some lead would come down and form that letter, and it would scoot off and get into line with the next letter. So he was actually pressing, it was an amazing sort of process. And they set all those classified ads that way. All those classified ads were set that way, but of course what's happened is classifieds now are Craigslist, use Victoria. And the newspapers are having a hard time. They're having to lay off. And in fact, the people who are suffering are the journalists who are, they had the money coming in from the classified advertising, and obviously other advertising, but classified was really the primary part. And then they would support the newsmen who would go out and gather the news and keep us informed. That's the crisis that is happening today. That's why we have paywalls online, because they have to find ways to generate revenue. Now, in my life, even though, I mean, I was always at the hands as a designer. You all probably are aware that I was a graphic designer. I've been most of my life. And we depended on the typography. And it was always, waiting for that, because this took time. This was a time-consuming process. And so you'd wait for the stuff to come in, and so it was always, you were waiting for it. But then technology changed. In 1984, John Warnock invented PostScript, computer language. Now I'm sure, how many of you have PostScript laser printers in your house? No, I mean, there's more than one, I'm sure. Nevertheless, that's what the language that drives it. And Steve Jobs, famous Apple founder, he brought out his first laser writer printer. I mean, it was a laser printer, it cost $5,000. And I bought one. Wow, that was a huge amount of money, I can say. But I had the power. It was in my hands. It was now I had control of the typography, and I could actually do it in my own studio. And that is an extraordinary advance for me. And that was pretty well half of my working life. I did the first half analog and the second half digitally. Now, these are all the different things that happened for the history of printing. You can't read them, but it's not really important. But the key dates, the movable type, 1450, rotary presses, big presses that were there, was 1843, photo typesetting, doing it with a complicated system of shooting a beam through photo fonts. Letraset. Does anybody know what letraset is? It's the transfer of lettering. 1961. It was revolutionary. And then, of course, digital printing that the world has all around us. And now today, what do we have? We have singularly the most powerful typographic tool that has ever existed right here. This thing here. Because we can sit there and punch in our typography. We're not setting at one letter, we put it with our finger. And then we can send it out. So as Confucius say, man who spends all day twittering has a bird brain. And you know what that
Oh, I wonder who we think the bird brain is.